gracias por venir. Espero que aprovechéis y disfrutéis de la presencia de Lukas, que es desde luego una satisfacción tenerlo aquí. Acaba de llegar ahora mismo desde Los Ángeles a las 8:30 de la mañana. Tengáis en cuenta que no parece cansado, pero lo debe de estar. Y ha hecho un gran esfuerzo por estar aquí. El fruto de esta ponencia es una colaboración de todas las oficinas de Europa Creativa Media con Sources 2, una iniciativa de training en escritura de guiones con la que llevamos colaborando mucho tiempo, y este es uno de las acciones que finalmente pues, hemos querido hacer, que es la primera vez que se hace en España, y bueno, qué mejor que con una figura como, bueno, emergente como Lukas y con una gran película que supongo que ahora habéis visto todos vosotros. Dar las gracias evidentemente a CICUS por el espacio, a José Luis, que no está aquí, pero bueno, a toda la organización de los EFA. Y sin más, lo único que quiero es que disfrutéis, que hagáis todas las preguntas que haya que hacer, que aprovechéis que está aquí Lukas, que no va a volver otro día, ¿vale? Que después de esto se va y ya no va a venir aquí. Y que por favor que lo aprovechéis y que le preguntéis todo aquello que deseéis saber, aunque no os atreváis. ¿De acuerdo?
Cuando gane el Globo de Oro o el Oscar a película extranjera, sabréis que estabais aquí sacándole todas las preguntas y las necesarias, así que aprovechad.
Exacto, él lo ha dicho mejor. Y bueno, sin más, voy a dejar el micrófono a Marion Gomper, de Sources, para que bueno, presente a Lukas, que lo conocéis de hace mucho tiempo y ha sido además alumno suyo. Gracias.
Gracias. Yeah, warm welcome from my side as well. I'm Marion Gomper from Sources. And yeah, I must say we feel so honored to have a Sources of Inspiration lecture here in Sevilla on occasion of the European Film Awards. And so we are very grateful for this, and we thank the Spanish Creative Europe desks from Madrid, San Sebastián, Barcelona and Sevilla for hosting us here and making this event possible. And we also thank European Film Academy for their kind cooperation. And of course, finally, we thank Creative Europe Media for having supported Sources for such a long time. So Sources 2 is a training program that has been offering script development and training for professional filmmakers all over Europe for 26 years now in 30 countries, and almost 170 films developed through Sources 2 have been made to date. Sources of Inspiration is a series of lectures that has been initiated in '92, and since then our printed lectures have been distributed all over the world. And now I'm very happy to introduce our Sources of Inspiration lecturer today, Lukas Dhont. And Lukas, very warm welcome. It's great you are here. Thank you so much. Lukas won't be only the youngest lecturer we ever had at Sources, but is also a former Sources 2 participant. His popular film Girl was developed in a Sources 2 script development workshop 2 years ago. So you can imagine how proud we are. After its premiere in Cannes, Girl won 4 awards in Cannes, and since then took such a successful journey all over the world and won many awards and nominations. It's now the Belgian Oscar submission, and now here in Sevilla is Girl with 3 nominations for the European Film Awards. So let's keep fingers crossed. I'm now very happy to pass the word to Lukas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna sit down, I think, but I'll move as close to you as I can. So hello, everyone. First of all, I have to address the fact that I feel strange sitting on this side of the stage because I was always the one on your side. And this is the first time, actually, I am on this side. So it's a strange feeling. I hope that I will say things during this hour that will inspire you. I'm not sure, as I feel like I am myself learning so much about what it is to make a film or what it is to be an artist. But I decided to talk about who I am, and why I did the things that I did and why I made the films that I made, in the hope that there are things in there that are inspirational. Um, First of all, it's important to say that I didn't always want to be a filmmaker. When I was young, I wanted to be a dancer. When I grew up, I had this big passion for dance. And I gave, like, when I was in school, I gave small performances for my classmates. I danced on Destiny's Child, I danced on like all the popular hits. And I found out that it was kind of awkward for my classmates that I did that. They felt like it was not really, they didn't really feel comfortable with it. And I saw that. And in a way, that was the first time that I understood that a boy is supposed to behave a way and a girl is supposed to behave another way. I think it's a stereotype that is changing, and that actually I've decided with my work I want to help change. And that has taken a big part in why I make the films that I make, and why I also made a film like Girl. But so back to me dancing on Destiny's Child when I was a kid. Because I felt that it was awkward, I stopped dancing. I stopped dancing, and I took the advice of my dad to go to the Boy Scouts. And so I did that. I went to the Boy Scouts, and I did not really enjoy that, but I did it, and I tried to fit into the idea of a Boy Scout. And so I think that there, in that moment where I tried to fit in and not do what I wanted to do, a big theme of my work developed. I didn't know that at that moment, of course. But I think films cannot be anything but very personal. And even though they're not autobiographical, there will always be elements that happen to your life or that happen to someone else in your life that will influence the films that you make. At that moment, I also discovered directing people, saying people what to do. My brother, for example, I really enjoyed directing him. And I really enjoyed directing my mother. And I really enjoyed directing my father. To great frustration of all of them, but still I kept on doing it. And for my communion, I asked my mother if she would give me a camera. And she said yes. And that's the first time actually that I had a camera in my hands, and that I started filming something. And I started filming my brother, and I started filming my mother, who really didn't want to be filmed. And I made small little films of it. I didn't edit them myself, a friend of my mom's did. But I started trying to create small little narratives. And actually my mom made me look back, she kept all that. And she made me look back at that material. And sometimes I myself am in the frame. And it was a very confrontational moment for me watching those clips together with my mother. Because if I look at myself in that moment, I see a very feminine boy. And that femininity has been something that has always, when I was younger, when I was a child, that neither my mother or my father were comfortable to discuss that with me. It's only much later that we started to discuss that. But also that element for me growing up, me feeling like I was very feminine and like the boys around me were not like that, has become an essential theme in my work today. It's actually always been there, but with Girl, I think it's the first time that I really talk about it so concretely. So back to me having the camera and filming my family. I continued filming and I was able to start editing myself at the age of 15. And I was really into slasher movies. I was really into horror, and I was really into bodies that got hurt and got stabbed and got slashed. And so I bought a lot of blood, and I tried to have my friends come over and make like a small version of what a very famous movie at that time called Scream. And my fascination for horror continued to stay, and I think that it is because it's a genre in which effect is very at the essence. For me as a filmmaker, the first genre that I discovered was horror, because I felt like it was easy for me to have an effect while I was making horror. I could scare people, or I could be very dramatic. And all these things. And I think that now looking back on that period and looking at my work now, I think that the horror of the body is something that still lingers through my work, not in the way of a slasher, stabber horror film, but in a completely different, maybe more realistic way. But I'll get back to that when I talk about Girl. My father really wanted me to study math sciences in high school. He didn't really like the idea of me going to an art school. And so we had agreed that if I did that, if I studied math sciences, that he would let me try film school when I was 18. And so we had that agreement. And actually in high school, I was in a very Catholic high school. And although I really enjoyed being there, my creativity and my personality had been really paused. I knew by that time what it was like to try to fit in by being in the Boy Scouts. And actually in high school, I did much more of that, being where I was. And then at 18, I was allowed to start film school. And it was a big, big clash for me, because all of a sudden I was in an environment with a lot of different people and a lot of different personalities, outspoken personalities, people that really knew who they were, people that knew what they wanted to talk about. And I was 18 and I didn't know any of that. I didn't really know who I was, and I definitely didn't know what to talk about. And if I even had something to talk about. My entry film for film school was a slasher film in which I killed my brother. Luckily, they let me into that film school because I think they felt the passion that I had for films, for cinema. And at that time, it was really a sort of American Hollywood cinema, because that's the cinema that I grew up with. That's the cinema that my family loved. That's the cinema that was proposed to me. My mom is a big Titanic fan. I think she has seen it for over 20 times. And if people ask me what is the most important movie to date in my life, then I respond Titanic, but not because of the film, because of the fact that the film made me see the effect that films can have on people. When I saw my mom talk about Titanic, and she saw that film at a moment in her life where she just had divorced my dad, I saw that the film healed her in a way, because she was in need of this big love story to contradict the reality of her life at that moment, and that film gave that to her. And so, by seeing that, I discovered the power of cinema. I discovered the power of being in a room, shutting down from your own reality and entering another reality for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. And that idea that made me so enthusiastic that I would be, or would try to be able to do that, that I think there for sure I knew that cinema was what I wanted to continue with. And so when they allowed me to enter film school, when they allowed me to try to be there, I was extremely happy. I was extremely happy and extremely scared, because I felt like being there was going to be a very tough time for me. And so the first year started, and I was right. Because I had tried to fit in for 18 years, I didn't really have an outspoken personality like the other people, and I didn't really have honest themes that I wanted to talk about. So my first year was a hot mess, because my teachers confronted me with the fact that my films were really boring, and that and by saying so, that I as a person was really boring. And that was a hard confrontation. And then I said to myself, I will use my films to be more honest than I am in real life, or than I can be in real life. And the thing was that I am a homosexual man, and I had not ever talked about my sexuality with anyone. I think now, looking back, if you want to make films, you have to be extremely honest. You have to be extremely honest with yourself. You have to be extremely honest with the world around you. And I think that my films were not good at that moment because I was not. I was not honest. So I decided to talk about the themes that had been very important in my life by my films, and not by verbally talking with people, but by addressing those topics in my films. And in a way that felt safe for me, because I could talk about them, but at the same time distance myself from a direct confrontation. And so a first short film existed, which is called Corps Perdu, and which is a short film about a young ballet dancer. I think what was very important for me in my education in my film school is that it was a school that combines documentary and fiction. So we never had to choose in the school between one of the two. We had to make short documentaries and we had to make short fictions. And I was always convinced that I wanted to make fictions. That's also why I made my first short, Corps Perdu. And I never was really interested in documentary. I was interested in creating. I was interested in writing and then creating things that did not exist, rather than being confronted with what existed. But I had to make a short documentary because everyone needed to. And I decided to go to a house where children of immigrants and sailors live together while their parents are away. And I was there for 3 months, watching, being with the kids. I slept there. And I was filming myself. And while I was doing that, I discovered the power of looking at something, of really, really looking at something and letting something exist in front of your lens. Sorry, bronchitis. Better. And I had always been trying to narrate, and create. And now for the first time, I was really watching reality and let reality be what the film was gonna be. And actually making that documentary learned me so much about taking the time to look the position of where, as a camera and as a person and as a director, I wanted to be at, and the way I wanted to show something. And what it learned me most of all, because I never knew what was going to happen, I never knew what the kids were going to do, I never knew what was going to come, was the power of the moment, the power of something existing without you trying to control it. And I think I took that in my fiction. When I'm on set, when I direct, I have my scripts, but I'm always looking for that moment in which there will be something that I cannot control. And actually my whole fiction set is based on that idea. The whole technical team, me, myself as a director, we take as less place as possible. The people that take the most place on my set are the actors. We never use a lot of lighting. The decor is always ready. The apartment is always able to go wherever you want. And so the people that take the biggest position on my set are the actors. And that is something that I learned through shooting documentary. Still, after shooting that documentary, I was even more convinced that I wanted to do fiction. Because what was hard on me shooting a documentary was I felt that even though I learned a lot about that position, I found it difficult to be somewhere and then have to leave and taking something with me. I felt there was a brutality to that was very difficult for me to handle, and that in that short period of time I didn't really know how I as a person dealt with that. With the ethics of filming someone and me myself editing the narrative on someone that exists. So I continued with fiction. And I made another fictional short film called L'Infini, Infinity, which was my master's film, and which is a film about a young boy whose father returns from prison and who is confronted with, for the first time, the figure of a father, the figure of a masculine energy. And when I was writing that film, it came very naturally, but I didn't really know why that was a film that was coming out of me. And at the time I had a teacher that taught music and film, and actually she had become really a little bit my personal mentor. And she was really the one that for the first time confronted me with the themes that I work with, the themes that are in my work. Because now I'm able to speak about them and able to go back in my, let's say, timeline to know where they're from. But at that time, I really didn't know why I was doing the things that I did, why I was showing the things that I showed. And L'Infini is a film that is a struggle between masculinity and femininity in a very concrete way, a struggle between a father and a mother and a young boy in between. But in a much abstracter way, it is a struggle between a masculine energy and a feminine energy. And that is something that had been very important for me as a child, for me as a teenager, and at that moment in my life for me as a filmmaker. And so finding out those central themes like gender or behavior were very important for the continuation then after school. I have to say that for me as a filmmaker, the first time, because I grew up with American cinema, the first time I was confronted with the possibilities of a camera or the possibilities of the medium of cinema were by Elephant by Gus Van Sant. I watched that film in the first year of film school, and it's through seeing Elephant that I found out that a camera and a way of using that camera narrates just as much as the script of a film or as the actors of a film. I really saw how the position of a camera, the way we follow the character, the way we looked at something, defined how we interpreted it. And also the fact of timing, which is so crucial. The script of the script of Elephant is like 16 pages or something, 15 pages, and still it is a 90-minute film. And the timing of that film is so spectacular. I watched that film, I think, twice. I watched that film a lot of times because I was shocked with the other possibilities next to what I had seen as American cinema. Explosions, ships that sunk, all these things. And through Gus Van Sant, I discovered another Belgian artist that became extremely important to me, which is called Chantal Akerman. And Jean Dieleman, I don't know who saw Jean Dieleman. Did anyone of you see Jean Dieleman? No? Okay, you should all watch Jean Dieleman. She's gonna rock your worlds. Chantal Akerman left us, unfortunately. But Jean Dieleman is an amazing work of art about a widowed woman in the 70s that we follow through her daily routine. And the loneliness of that, the cage of that. And I think that there's a lot of Chantal Akerman in Girl. I think there's a lot of Jean Dieleman in Girl. And I actually had one person describe the comparison as the fact that in Jean Dieleman, Chantal really tries to show those invisible cages of a widowed woman in the 70s by the repetition of the daily routine in her house. And in Girl, I think we try to show those cages for a young trans person by constantly repeating the repetition of the ballet scenes. Someone that is in a very binary world, in the ballet world, a very gender-specified world, is constantly fighting, working, dancing to fit into that world. Yeah. So Chantal Akerman became very important to me. And next to that, I started watching another very famous Belgian pair of filmmakers called the Brothers Dardenne. Has anyone seen films from the Brothers Dardenne? Yes, okay. And when I was reading about the films of the Brothers Dardenne, they released a book, very interesting book about their work. I saw that they were using choreography as a way to build up their films. They really use their cameras as choreographers. They use their cameras as dancers that move around the characters in very long shots. Their mise en scène is extremely important. And they move around their characters like their cameras are dancers. And I was like, wow, these brothers are using dance in their cinema. And I want to use dance in my cinema. I want to be able to use the thing that I quit doing because I felt uncomfortable doing it. I want to find a place for dance in my films. And so I went looking for a way. I think I started seeing a lot of modern dance spectacles. And there's one choreographer very specifically that became very important to me, which is called Jan Martens. And Jan Martens, I would call him a very cinematographic choreographer that always builds up pieces around different relationships between people by just showing movements. He has a very famous piece called Victor, which is a dance performance between a grown man and a child. And the tension between the two of them changes from being a father and a child to friends to lovers. And the power of changing those tensions just by the way these people moved around each other or with each other made me see the power of visuals, made me see the power of movement, and made me see that as a filmmaker, I really wanted to base my films on movement rather than on dialogue. There's so many filmmakers that are so powerful in dialogue, and I can enjoy those films so much, but I knew that it's not my forte. When I start writing a dialogue, it feels not good. It feels not like people talk to each other. I find people that write good dialogue, I have so much appreciation for them. It's like people that direct comedy. For me, they're the highest. I mean, they should be up here. Because people that direct comedy are extremely talented. But so I discovered I really wanted to work with visuals, and I really wanted to work with movements. And in a way, Chantal Akkerman and Gus Van Sant were already examples of that, because they are filmmakers in which movement is the central thing. Movement and sound. And sound has become a very important part in my films because I wanted to work with visuals, but I at the same time still wanted to make cinema. And so cinema is also supported by its sounds and its music. And I discovered that sounds can really add different layers to one visual. You can see a visual, but the sound that you add to it can shape completely a different world, can shape something completely different to that image. And that same teacher that I was talking about, Martine, that became my mentor, she was a teacher in sound and music, and she really made me aware of the impact of sound and music on something. She really made me see that if you add music, if you add sound, that you can create tension, that you can create emotion, that you can create so many different things. When I made L'Infini, I really wanted to experiment with all that. I put visuals, I put storm sounds, I put music, I put everything. And in a way, it's an unfinished film. In a way, it's an experiment. And in a way, I like the fact that the title also is L'Infini, which means unfinished. But the ground, the fundaments were there in that film of what Girl became. Because Girl is the first film that I made after school. I didn't continue after school to make short films because the idea of Girl was already in my head. Actually, in 2009, when I was 18 and about to start film school and still not very honest with who I was, I discovered a story in a Belgian journal about a young 15-year-old trans girl called Nora, who wanted to become a classical dancer, but whose school did not allow her to change classes from the boys' class to the girls' class. And I cut out that article immediately. I cut it out and I kept it with me. And I think my main reason why that article was so important to me is because this was a confrontation for me with a 15-year-old that chose the truest version of herself, that was extremely honest, that said what she wanted to do and showed her ambition. And in this article were all the elements of what I had been confronted with as a kid. There was the dancing that I had quit and that she continued to do. B, there was a confrontation between a man and a woman and gender and biology. And C, there was this theme of who am I, who do I want to be, and how do I get there, that I felt like was gonna be important, what that was important to me at the time, but was definitely gonna be important in my work. And so I kept it because I knew the moment that I quit film school, I want this to be my first film, in the hope that at that moment in time I will be able to be honest and make it. And so I and so I contacted her during film school and I said, I have such a big admiration for you. Would you like to meet me and see what we can do? And she refused. She refused because she was at a very difficult moment in her life and because the media had been very eager to write about her story and about her school not accepting her to dance as a girl. And I was very sad that she refused, but I said okay. And the year after, I tried again. And my persistence, I think, made her want to meet me. We met each other. And I said, I really want this to be my first film. I really want to write something about you. And luckily, she agreed. And we started talking about her life and about her wanting to become a classical dancer. And I think from talking a lot with her, I found out that although she had been very true to herself at a young age, although she had been very honest at a young age, she had come at a point in life where she wanted to disappear, where she wanted to fit in, where she definitely didn't want to stand out and not be the trans girl that is an example or the trans girl that is different. She wanted to be like the rest. And I recognized myself. I recognized me and what I had been trying to do to fit into a heteronormative society. She was trying to fit into a cis society. And I said, that's what I want the film to be about. I want the film to be about that moment in our lives where we rather want to fit in than stand out. And I knew in that moment that I had been living up to making that film for, at that moment in time, 21 years. 21 years I had been living up to make a film about that subject. And so when people, sometimes in interviews, people ask me now, as a cis director, can you talk about trans people? Can you talk about trans subjects? And I always, of course, answer to that in a polite way, because you get media trained to do so. But here I'll be more honest, and I'm always extremely upset when I get that question. Because, like, this film is about a very personal subject. And yes, this is a trans character, and yes, I am not trans. But we are both human beings that go through emotions, that go through phases in our lives, and we understand each other even if we are not exactly the same. And so for me, I have always seen cinema as a bridge. I make cinema because I want to have an effect on people, but I also make cinema for myself. And when I make it for myself, is because I want to get to know someone and I want to understand other people better. And by doing so, I understand myself better. Cinema, and now I'm stealing words of Sebastian Lelio, this is a life lesson that doesn't come from me. Maybe it's the only life lesson you'll get. It's from a much more advanced director. Sebastian Lelio talked about it as cinema should not be a wall. People ask me, can I make something as a cis straight man about a trans woman? I say yes. Yes, if I do it with respect. Yes, if I put the work in. Yes, because I make cinema to try to get to know the world and let that world be seen by other people. And I feel exactly the same way. And that's also how I feel about acting. Because Victor in this film plays a trans girl and he himself is a teenager. We all know that that's when you try to get to know who you are, but he doesn't identify as trans at the moment. And that sometimes has led to controversy, which has always really confused me. Because yes, we want to see trans talent on screen. Yes, we want to hear trans voices. That's one of the reasons we made this film. But we don't want to fight for inclusion by exclusion. We don't want to limit performers to their identities. We want to open up the barriers now that we're trying to open them up. We want to tear down the cages. And I think that when we see Victor's performance in Girl, we see that one of the biggest strengths for me on any artist is empathy and is trying to connect to the world and trying to connect to other people. Okay. And so when I was writing Girl, the dialogues that I had between Nora and myself were at the base of the script. I didn't want to write alone. I didn't want to put myself through the solitude of writing alone. People that write alone, wow. You're like also heroes to me. I cannot write alone. For me, writing has to be a dialogue. Otherwise, if that dialogue is interior, which it also becomes sometimes, it's a very lonely place for me. So I I worked with a screenwriter that is actually a theater maker called Angelo Thesis. He makes very funny theater. He's much funnier than me. And he's like a nice guy. And we both really wanted to talk about these subjects. I felt that the first time writing, after I had done short films and really experimented with movement, and now all of a sudden we had to build this tension of a feature film. We had to engage people for an hour and a half or longer to stay watching that film. And that was like, in the beginning when we were writing, that was very tough because I was still conceptually writing my movements and my dance things, and I wrote very conceptually. And I thought maybe I can do like Gus Van Sant and only write 13 pages and then film it. But people didn't really respond to my 13 pages. And I had to find a way to write, to understand the tension of a feature film. And so I said I have to need more help. I'm going to have to need more help than just one person. And so I decided to do script workshops. I decided to have much more other people respond to what I wrote, see how they react, and let them teach me things that I don't know. Let them talk to me about scripts. And that's how I ended up at Source 2 in Norway, where I got to know Marion, and where I was confronted with many other filmmakers that all had very good ideas and were all trying to write them out, trying to make them into a feature film. And you get a lot of reactions. You get a lot of people reading your stuff and reacting and thinking, and that sometimes can be very confusing, but it's also extremely helpful because you start to see which reactions come back, and you start to see which reactions you resonate with and which you don't resonate with. And in a way, you learn more about the film you want to make, and also more about the film you don't want to make. Because some people during the process, and I not only did Source 2, I also did Atelier Angers from the Premier Plan Festival, and I also did Ciné Fondation Résidence from the Cannes Film Festival, which is actually a residence in which you get to stay 6 months in a apartment in Paris with 5 other filmmakers, and you get to talk a lot about films. I would also recommend. You get to know really what you want your film to be. When I was writing Girl, and a lot of the times that I was talking to people, people told me, the father needs to be the main character. The father needs to be the main character because he is our way in. And for the longest time, I doubted whether there was truth in that, and maybe that would have been a great film, but it's not the film that I wanted to make. I didn't want to go through another character to arrive at our trans character. I wanted the trans character to be the lead, and I wanted it to be about her. And also at that time, there was not a lot of really concrete conflicts with the world around the trans character, and people were wondering whether we didn't need more people that refused her, that didn't accept her, so that there would be something for the audience to react to. And so all these things we felt like could be valid, but we also really reacted to them as that's not the film that we want to make. We want to make a film in which the protagonist is her own antagonist, in which we see a trans character and we see the relationship that she has with herself, with her own self-image, and we use the ballet world as a metaphor for a much bigger society that thinks in a very binary way, that thinks in fairy tales, that thinks in roles for men and roles for women. And then we're confronted with this young trans character that is trying to find her way in that world. But all those people that you talk to that disagree or that think differently are as valuable as the people that say to you, great idea. Because the people that don't necessarily agree teach you maybe sometimes even more, for me, than the people that agree. And actually that has become very essential for me up until now. Because not everyone likes Girl. People react to it sometimes in a very, very shocked, negative way. And I listen to those people just as much as I listen to the people who love Girl. And it's not to torture myself, although making something and putting yourself in a very vulnerable place and then people destroying it is, in a way, destructive. But I feel like I'm able to see it as points that make me learn more about my filmmaking and learn more about how I want to continue and learn more about the films that I really want to make. And so I feel that that is a very calming comforting idea for myself, because when there is criticism, I'm able to say to myself, I will use this. I will use this for me, and I will not, of course, it's theory. In practice, you're always a little bit hurt and you want to shed a tear and call your mom. But I try to see it as something useful. So when I wrote Girl, and with all the script workshops that were very helpful, there was not a point at which I thought, this script is finished. And I feel like a script is never finished. It's not our end product. The end product is the film. And so although I really think a script needs time, and needs the right shaping, and needs tension, and needs all those things, I also think that the pressure of making it perfect is sometimes what kills a film. I have a lot of friends around me that also make films, that have been working on their scripts, sometimes for a short time, sometimes for a much longer time. And the tendency that I see is that when you work on something and continue and overwork it, that the script becomes too important. And although it has to be important, I think it also has to be seen as a tool which you go on set and then shape something completely there, shape something new. Try to also allow yourself to let go of the scene that you wrote and see what is in front of you, see what works and doesn't work, and see life exist in front of your eyes. For me, it's the thing that excites me most about making a film. When I see my actors do something that I did not expect them to do. It is what excites me most, because it's when I really get the feeling that, and this is a little bit maybe arrogant, but that I really get the feeling I'm creating. When they start having a life of their own, I really have the feeling that something is being created. And so that is very exciting to me. This experience of making a first film, we spent 4 years really actively working on it. Film is something that is a teamwork. This film is, I get credited a lot because I go to places talking about this film, and yes, it came out of me, and yes, it's super personal, and yes, maybe I was at the steer, but film is a work of a team of people, of so many people. And this film is really, I recognize all the people that worked with me on this film, I recognize them in the film. My cameraman, Frank van den Eden, my editor, Alain de Sauvage, my first assistant, Siel van Dalen. Everyone behind the scenes has an element in this film. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons for me as a first-time filmmaker of a feature film, is giving everyone the trust that they deserve. If you choose the people you work with, you also have to allow them to breathe and do their own things and have their element in the end product. I think because at the age of 12, I started to know that I wanted to make films. I had been living up to this moment and really wanted to control every single thing. Because I felt like, although my actors could do what they wanted, behind that I wanted to be in control. And I wanted to act like I knew everything. But I know so little. That's also why I'm talking to you about my life. Because I know so little about really what it takes to make a film. And I feel like that's not a bad thing. It's the fact that I don't know certain things is why I want to continue doing what I do, to get to know them. And it's exciting to get to know them. But so trusting all the members of a team that you work with to have their own elements, to have their elements in what you do, is a lesson that I had to learn by making this film. Because sometimes I feel like I try to control it too much. And it could have been okay for me to also say, I don't know what to do with this now. When Darren Aronofsky said this beautiful phrase, I think a film is never, you never finish a film, you abandon a film. And I feel that that is extremely true. Because you go through all these phases of making a film, writing it, shooting it, editing it, and you have the hope that at a certain point you will feel, yeah, it's done. This is exactly what I wanted it to be. And I was waiting for that moment where I was gonna be like, this is it. And that moment didn't really come because I felt like there was always something that could become more, that could continue. And I didn't feel that. And I watched if other directors felt that same way, and that's how I discovered Darren Aronofsky talking about abandoning a film. And I felt like I abandoned Girl. And that felt strange in the beginning, but at a certain point, it felt also liberating. It felt liberating to abandon her. Often people say that a lot of times the first film of a filmmaker, the first feature film, is really the film that they have been living up to for a long time of their life. So it's a lot of times a very important film in their life. And that's also why a first film, I have the feeling of a lot of directors that I know is one of my favorite films of them. And I have the feeling that with Girl, that is absolutely true. This is the film that I had been living up to, that I really wanted to make as a first film. I hope it will not be. I hope my next one will be better, but I'm afraid of it. Well, afraid is a strong word. I have mixed feelings about it. So yeah, that that's, I think, what I wanted to say. Maybe I should talk about the music in this film. Who has everyone seen Girl? Okay, that's nice. I have to talk to you about Valentin Hadjadj, which is my composer, and who I worked with for the first time on L'Infini, my last short film. I got to know him at a festival in Aubagne, and someone said to me, this guy is the new Mozart. And I was like, okay. And I listened to what Valentin was doing, and it was extremely, extremely powerful. And so we started to work on basis of the script of L'Infini. He started to make music on the basis of the scripts. And actually it was so nice because before I created something, it's like Valentin tried to concretize. Is that a verb? We all understand what I mean. Concretize my thoughts and my writing. And so it's like before I even started creating, Valentin created music. And that music, we played it on set, and I played it to my actors, and I played it to myself. And it was a very powerful thing because we felt like they were entering, he made us enter the atmosphere of the film. And when so I knew I wanted to collaborate with him on Girl as well. And he started writing music very early on during the first, second, or third drafts of the scripts. And when I talked to him, and actually when I talked to everyone, every single member of my team, I always said, I want the film to have a physical effect. I want the film to work physically. I want people that come to watch the film to have a physical experience. And Valentin really, I think, understood what I wanted. And he went to listen to a lot of Arvo Pärt, with a lot of like sharp sounds, with a lot of violins, with a lot of sharpness. And the first music he created was so extremely hard to listen to. It was like physical. Um, and then he continued on that path, and he really, I think, he is really to me a collaborator on the effect that I want to have with my films, because I feel like the music in um, Girl is really adding to the physical effect in the dance scenes, or the physical effect that the film has. And this word physical has become very, very important to me. It was important actually in all my shorts. It was important in Girl, of course. And one thing I discovered after making 3 shorts and a feature is that there's one thing that is always coming back. And that is, and now I think I'm analyzing myself, of course, but with with my camera, I always seem to tend to try to touch the characters in front of me, or I always seem to try to physically interact with people. And it's actually something that I didn't allow myself to do in real life for 22 years. For 22 years, I didn't allow myself to have a physical relationship with another human being. And I feel like in my work, that's what I'm trying to do. Not only on a mental level, trying to get to know people, trying to understand them, trying to reach out to them, but also very much on a physical level, I try to touch them. And I think that's why my camera has always been extremely close. My camera has always been really trying to focus on the body, and is really trying to, be intimate. When I was talking with Girl about every member of my team, I always said I wanted to be physical. I wanted to work on the body. And actually, that is the continuation of my passion to become a dancer. It's this passion for when you go to watch a dance performance, it's a physical experience. You have, a lot of times, you have bodies in front of you that interact. There's this physicality, and you react to it with your body. With my films, I want to have the same interaction with my audience. Um, and in Girl, the dance is very literally present. In the next one, it will maybe be more in a way like the brothers Dardenne used it, by using the camera as a choreographer around situations, by trying to use movements, by addressing it in a completely different way. But what I do know is that, yet again, I think I will try to look for that physical experience.